Time for another Jacobean tragedy. Welcome to all Strut No Fret one-shots, where I drink a shot and then have a shot at telling the whole plot of an early modern play in one shot, no cuts, no edits. Today, the play is going to be John Webster's The White Devil, and the fuel to get me through it is going to be this grappa, which tastes kind of gross, but I just couldn't resist the beautiful bottle because I'm a complete sucker for anything Art Nouveau. So this is one way to get rid of some of it. Let's see how we go. The White Devil was first performed around 1608 or 9 and printed in 1612. It was based on all the really dramatic, rumory, gossipy stories that were coming out of Italy and all through the previous century related to families like the Medicis and the Borgias. So expect lots of creative death. However, we don't open with our central characters. We open with one beautiful, simple, dramatic word: banished. Banished is the cry of Count Lodovico, who has been banished from Rome and is very, very cranky about it. Almost immediately we move to a scene that is much more central, which is where we meet our chief female character, Vittoria Corombona, and it's easier to think of this play less as a sequence of events and more as a sort of family tree map. Vittoria is in the middle here, and let's see the people around her. Around her we have her husband Camillo, the man she actually loves, the Duke of Bracciano, and as a go-between between herself and Bracciano, one of her two brothers, Flaminio. Her mother Cornelia is also there, and also her waiting woman Zanche, and it's quite significant that Zanche is African. There's lots of references to her being Moorish. And those are the people who we need to know within this family. So when we meet them, we're at Vittoria and Camillo's house. Bracciano has arrived, and Flaminio persuades Camillo that it will really teach his wayward wife a lesson if he refuses to come to her bed that night, thus clearing the way for Bracciano. Their mother Cornelia, though, is watching from the shadows, and she is, which is a little bit pervy, and she is very unhappy about the way the family name is being disgraced here. So Vittoria and Bracciano, facilitated by Flaminio and Zanche, are brought together until they are rudely interrupted by Vittoria's mother Cornelia, who brings news that Bracciano's wife Isabella has unexpectedly come to Rome. So we switch to the Roman apartments of Francisco de' Medici, who it turns out is the brother of said Isabella, wife of Bracciano. Also there is the Cardinal Monticelso, who is very much a family ally. Now, they talk to Isabella about what a disgrace she's undergoing, and she says, look, I don't really care. I just love my husband and I just want to be with him. So they say, well, we'll leave you to talk to him first. So Bracciano shows up. Isabella, he makes it very clear to Isabella straight away that he is leaving her for Vittoria. And she says, well, it's going to be a real problem for everyone if you do that openly, and my brother knows that you've dumped me. He'll go to war with you. Lots of people will suffer. Lots of people will die. So I will make him think that I'm the one who's caused the rift between us. And then her brother Francisco and Monticelso come back in, and she does this spectacular performance of being an outraged, shrewish wife, and she really gets everything out of her system that she would like to say about Vittoria, but hasn't up until now because she's a trademark good woman. And so she says, would I were a man or had the power of my apprehended wishes, I would whip some with scorpions. So she gets some good lines there. So Bracciano sees this as a really terrific out because he says, look, see, she's the one who's causing us to break up. So there we are. Now, then we skip ahead to a scene where Bracciano hires a conjurer, which is a bit fun, isn't it, to show him through visions in dumb show. Now, dumb shows are like little mimes that happen in plays from this period, where you see an acted out scene without words, so you can see something important that's going on for the plot. In this case, what the conjurer is showing Bracciano is the carrying out of the murders he's arranged. Firstly, of Vittoria's husband Camillo, who is arranged via Flaminio to appear to fall and break his neck in a gymnasium accident with a vaulting horse. They're very creative about this kind of thing. I should point out to you, and this is really significant, one thing you won't get from this plot summary is a sense of what a tremendous role Flaminio is. He is so much fun because he's terrible, and he's bitter and cynical and snarky and has no respect for anyone, just pure ambition and malice. And what you see through Flaminio, and then later through the other sibling, Marcello. So Vittoria and Flaminio actually have another brother, Marcello, who turns up later. Because the thing is, if you belong to a family like theirs, noble but impoverished, the one thing you could do if you were an ambitious young man to improve your circumstances was choose a guy and attach yourself to him and become that guy's guy. Now, Flaminio has decided to do that with Bracciano. He's decided that his fortune lies in becoming indispensable to that duke. Marcello, however, has attached himself to Francisco, so this brings the two of them into conflict later. But for the moment, all we need to know is Flaminio is Bracciano's guy, he murders Camillo. And the other murder the conjurer brings up is the murder, of course, you've guessed it, of Bracciano's good wife, Isabella, because she has a convenient habit of kissing the portrait of her husband every night before she goes to bed. So in true Jacobean fashion, they spread the portrait with poison, and she is poisoned and dies that way. Now, at the moment, the news hasn't got out about that because she's back home in Padua. But Camillo died in Rome, so almost immediately Vittoria is arrested and put on trial for his murder. And we have her big, beautiful, spectacular scene. And I cannot overstate how sensational this scene is for an actress, because she just runs rings round these important men. Francisco de' Medici should be the most important man in Italy. Monticelso, who's a cardinal. They are acting as both her prosecutors and her judge, which is something she pulls them up on. And they have set up her trial. It's very much a show trial, but it's in front of a whole room full of ambassadors from a range of countries. Here's another little quirk about this play that's worth noting. All the way through, there are these external groups of important men who are brought in either ambassadors or knights or lords of various kinds, and they're always, or cardinals, and it always gives you a sense that this is not a small private family feud we're seeing. It's something much bigger. It's something that's taking place in the public forum in the world of power plays. So Vittoria's put on trial. She makes it clear that they have nothing on her. She says of the fact that they have a letter showing Bracciano's devotion to her, you may as well blame a crystal stream that a poor distracted man has drowned himself in it. How is it my fault if he felt love for me? Now, another thing to note is that Bracciano does turn up for part of this trial and gets in to a verbal fight with Francisco and Monticelso, and then storms off and basically just leaves her there because, as we know, power pays little regard to evidence. So although they concede that they can't prove that she killed her husband, they are still able to pass sentence on Vittoria, and they send her off to a convent for convertites, which they explain as meaning for penitent whores. So she's going to be locked away in a convent, and off she goes. Now, after that, Flaminio and Lodovico, remember Lodovico banished from the beginning? He's managed to wrangle a pardon to come back to Rome, and he and Flaminio confront each other, have a fight, and Flaminio challenges Lodovico, but Lodovico doesn't answer his challenge yet. And the other remaining thing we see happen in Act 3 is that we see Francisco and Monticelso use Monticelso's book of rogues, which he keeps track of in Rome, to decide how to approach murdering Bracciano and Vittoria in revenge. And they decide to do it through Lodovico, and they bring him into the scheme. So we're up to Act 4, and the first thing that happens is Bracciano and Flaminio go to break Vittoria out of the convent, but first of all, Bracciano has a big jealous hissy fit about her, about other men being in love with her, and she is furious with him for understandably criticizing her when all she's got out of love for him is to be shut away in a convent. So they make up, kissy kissy, and off they run, and they're going off to be married. Now, Monticelso is then made pope, and Francisco and Lodovico make their plans about how they're going to go to Padua to commit these murders. Lodovico says, Francisco, you shouldn't do this yourself. You're too important. It will reflect badly on you. And he's like, I would not miss this for the world. So he disguises himself as a Moor, which is a little bit tricky for modern productions because we don't like to see blackface on stage anymore. So that's something that people have to figure out how to get around. He is going to pretend to be a Moor sent to the court of Padua with recommendation from Francisco, so he can be there to do the murdery himself. So we change to the scene to Padua, and that is where Bracciano has his court. And he is celebrating his marriage to Vittoria. They're very happy about this, with a tournament. So lots of jousting and pretend fights and things, which will conveniently allow the possibility of his murder. But first of all, we've got one more murder to happen, which is that Flaminio is also there with his brother Marcello, and Zanche has a relationship with Flaminio, and Marcello decides that therefore he's going to be incredibly rude to her, and they're all just slapping Zanche around for no reason except they're awful, awful jerks. And so they come into conflict, and Marcello sends his sword off to Flaminio to say, return it to me if you dare. Shortly after, Flaminio returns it to him through his guts, which is the way things are done there. Now, Mother Cornelia is pretty upset about this, as you can imagine, so she gets a nice big upset speech about that. But the next thing that happens is the tournament is now going to happen, and Lodovico gets the opportunity to sprinkle Bracciano's helmet with poison. So he puts the helmet on to fight. The idea with that kind of poisoning is you sweat, and that causes the poison to get into your pores. So he's poisoned with his helmet, and he takes a solid 2 scenes to die. Very scenery chewing over the top fashion. It's quite spectacular. Vittoria is distraught, and eventually, yes, he is dead. And now his and Isabella's teenage son, Giovanni, is made the new Duke. Giovanni is a really interesting role too. He actually gets a lot of really good lines for a boy role, which is usually a sort of introductory role in this period. Then we see Cornelia and Zanche winding Marcello's body in his shroud, and Cornelia goes spectacularly mad with lots of Ophelia-like behaviour and references. She even gives people rue and rosemary and so on. So Bracciano's dead, Cornelia's mad. Flaminio realizes, Giovanni won't see Flaminio. He thinks that he's dodgy as all get out and doesn't want anything to do with his father's right-hand man. So Flaminio realizes that he has hitched his wagon to the wrong star and his career is in real trouble. So he's going to go to his sister to ask her to bail him out. But he does this after seeing the ghost of Bracciano walk across the stage carrying a pot of lilies with a skull, and the ghost flings dirt at him, and Flaminio has trouble interpreting that this means that he's going to be dying very soon, though it seems obvious to the rest of us. So he takes a few pistols and he goes to find Vittoria and Zanche. Zanche, by the way, has fallen in love very rapidly with Francisco in his disguise, because everyone keeps commenting how incredibly noble and impressive this new visitor to the court is. So Zanche falls for him. She confesses to him that Camillo and Isabella were murdered, and that she is therefore going to rob Vittoria that night and run away with him, and Francisco just strings her along. But none of that has the chance to happen, because Flaminio goes and finds Vittoria and Zanche, and he threatens to kill them and says, actually, we should all die together, and he offers them pistols, and they, unsurprisingly, are not so keen, so they shoot him. However, he has put blanks in the guns, he pretends to be shot, and then he jumps up and says, I wasn't really shot, I was just testing whether you would do that to me, and now I know you will. Which I think personally seemed fair, given that he had just expressly said he was going to kill them. But before he has a chance to do anything more about that, Lodovico and his henchmen turn up. Now, Lodovico has persuaded Francisco to go back to Florence, because he says, you don't want to be seen murdering Vittoria. It's a really, it's a bad look. But I'm fine with it. So Lodovico turns up with a couple of henchmen, and they stab Flaminio, Zanche, and Vittoria. And wow, these Jacobean tragedy people know how to die, because they really come up with the best lines when they're facing death. Both Zanche and Vittoria are incredibly brave and stoic, and they face down their murderers and say, bring it on, only in much more elaborate language. It's like, I will meet you as princes meet great ambassadors. I will meet your weapon halfway, and so on. So they all get stabbed, and Vittoria ends her life with the very famous and useful line, happy are they who never knew the court, happy are they who never saw the court, nor ever knew great men but by report. And then she dies, and Flaminio says, I always knew that it would be a swordsmith who would determine the means of my death rather than a doctor. And so they die. Giovanni, who is now, remember the young boy, who is now the Duke, comes on and says to Lodovico, you're still a murderer, away with you to torture and death, because I won't have that in my court. And people who rise through corruption must realise how weak is the staff on which they lean, and that is it. Lots of lovely bodies scattered over the stage in true Jacobean fashion. But the question is, what is the White Devil? Now, I think the lazy assumption of a lot of people is the White Devil is Vittoria, because we're used to blaming women in these situations, but she comes out on the whole so well in this play. I prefer the theory that the White Devil in this play is actually power. It's that thing that looks attractive, looks desirable, but in the end will bring you down. Or perhaps potentially the White Devil is the hangover that a person can get from this rather splendid grappa.